the radical. Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this Tuesday night. Hope everybody's having a great week. I am heading off to Miami, well, to South Florida tomorrow. So I'll be in. Thank you, Jonathan. Appreciate the support. Heading off to South Florida tomorrow for a couple of conferences. One in West Palm Beach and one, I guess, between Miami and Fort Lauderdale. Early next week, and over the weekend I'll probably go over to Naples, yes, and visit some friends. So yeah, it's going to be a busy week on the road. I plan on doing some shows. From the road. We'll see how that works out. Always tricky, but hopefully it all works out and we'll be able to do some shows. I should have some time. The conferences are not super intense, and I think some of my evenings at least are open, so should be able to do some shows. Probably not as many as usual, probably not in the standard times. Should just be ready, I guess. Just be alert to when I'm advertising. I usually advertise the shows in advance on Twitter and on Facebook, so I'll do that there. But it won't be in conventional times because it'll depend on a moving target, the schedule, while I travel. All right, let's see. Today we are talking about this statement by, let me see if I can pronounce his name, Chamath, and I'm not going to even try his family name. Anyway, Chamath is a well-known venture capitalist in Silicon Valley. I think his parents are originally from Sri Lanka. I'm not sure where he was born, but I think he was raised in Canada and moved to the United States. He was one of the early employees at Facebook, made a lot of money at Facebook, then left, started his own venture capital fund, and today is worth well in excess of $1 billion. I don't know exactly how much, but he is definitely a billionaire and super successful. He is part of, I guess he does this regular podcast with some other guys called the All In podcast out of Silicon Valley. It has 145,000 subscribers, has a lot of viewers. This video that I will show you today has 176,000 views already. Although, you know, podcast with Yoram Chazoni has already 159,000 views. So the Lex Friedman interview. So we're in the same ballpark. Of course, I have a lot fewer subscribers, and which is just me on video. We don't quite make 175,000 views. That almost never happens. Once in a while, we get a good video that goes into six figures, but it's pretty rare. So we're going to talk about a section in this podcast that he did where he says some controversial stuff, and it was all over the news yesterday. It was all over Twitter yesterday. You know, backlash as U.S. billionaire dismisses Uyghur abuse. He's a part owner of the Warriors, so it's a big deal now in basketball land. Warriors part owner backtracks after saying he doesn't care about Uyghur abuse. It's not exactly what he says. Virgin Galactic distanced itself from chairman. He's the chairman of the board of Virgin Galactic. I bet you didn't know that. And everybody's running away from that. Anyway, he's in big trouble. Billionaire investor Chamath, whatever, says nobody cares about Uyghur genocide. So we're going to actually listen to what he actually says. I think it's interesting because I think this raises some interesting issues, both in morality and about morality and how to deal with moral issues. And is he right? Is he wrong? What do you guys think? I'm curious what you guys think. And then the conversation goes on, and there's a context in which you might have one point of view about what he says, and there's a different context that I think he establishes later where you might have a different view of what he says. So this is gonna be interesting. We'll talk about the Uyghurs, we'll talk about China, and we'll definitely talk about virtue signaling because that's part of what goes on here. So I thought this would be interesting. I thought it would be a little different. It's not political video. It's not one where we're going to just jump all over him. It's not one where I'm going to ridicule him like I do Tucker Carlson or some of our leftist friends. But it is a place where it's going to be interesting to have a conversation and to figure out what we all think. Yes, some of you have noticed I have now reached 28,000 subscribers. So we are slowly inching towards, the big time. I figure in about, 25 to 50 years, we'll have made it. Right? All right. Anyway, maybe we'll make it a 30,000 sometime mid-year maybe. Maybe earlier than that, we'll see. It would be nice if we could smash that 30,000 barrier within just a few weeks, but we'll see. It's hard to get attention out there, and it's hard for people to stay committed to the Yaron Brook Show. I don't know. It's as if I say controversial stuff that not everybody agrees with or piss people off all the time by jumping around, attacking the right, attacking the left, attacking stuff that nobody else attacks. I don't know. Ready to watch the video? All right. So I don't know how many of you know, but the Uyghurs are a people who live in Western China, a very deserty area on the borders of Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan and a bunch of stans, Afghanistan. It is an area dominated by Islam, so most of the population in this area are Muslim, Central Asian Muslims. It is an area from which, I'd say 10, 15 years ago, maybe 20 years ago, there was quite a few terrorist attacks against the Chinese. I don't know how many of you remember an attack at a railroad station where they came out with swords and they just basically, killed a bunch of people with swords, cutting off their heads. It was pretty brutal. And this was happening in China. All of that is stopped, at least as far as we know in the West. They might not be reporting on whatever terrorist attacks they have now. But as part of the response of the Chinese authorities to the rise of Islamism in this western region of China, what they've done is they've introduced what they are calling re-education camps, which are basically a type of concentration camp, a type of camp where people are imprisoned. There are reports of torture, of death among the Uyghurs with this attempt to oppress them and suppress them and to kind of drive Islam out of them. And it is interesting that, I know a lot of Americans and Europeans that there was a period there that were so anti-Islam that I'm sure would have joined in with the oppression of the Uyghurs in China. But it's wrong to provide collective punishment. It's wrong to penalize a whole people for the terrorists among them. They are your citizens. It's part of China. They have individual rights. They're innocent until proven guilty. That's not part of the Chinese government methodology. So what is going on in Western China is truly brutal. There is no question. These people are being oppressed. There certainly is no free speech. There's no freedom of conscience. There's no freedom of religion. They are being brainwashed. They are being penalized for their ideas. They're being penalized for their religion. And millions of people, I think, have gone through these camps that are part re-education camps, part prisons, part brainwashing and torture facilities. All of that is what they are going there. Uyghurs. I'll get this right. Wanda Freeman, thank you for correcting me. Uyghurs. So it's not Uyghurs, it's Uyghurs. You don't pronounce the U. I guess UYGH is E. No, UY is E. Gurs. Okay, I'm not going to try to do this. My phonics is awful. My reading ability is questionable. In English, never mind in whatever language Uyghurs is. But that's why I have Wanda Freeman here to correct me and to fix my pronunciation. Thank you. Anyway, that is the backstory. This is a conversation that Chamath is having with three other people. You'll see them as we go through this. One of them is clearly kind of a leftist who is concerned about human rights. The others are more Silicon Valley type pragmatists. So it's going to be interesting to watch the interaction and watch what he says. And let's see what he says and let's respond to what he actually says as he says it. So here is a section. We'll go for as long as you guys want. So far, I'll just mention that the way we fund this show is from monthly contributions on YourOwnBookShow.com/support, or from Patreon or Subscribestar. Just put in Your Own Book Show and you can make a monthly contribution there. That is my favorite way for you to support the show because that's predictable and regular and it comes in on a regular basis. But a big part of funding this show has become Super Chat. Super Chat is a way for you to ask questions. I know I've got a lot of new subscribers because of the Lex Friedman show, so a lot of new subscribers. So I use Super Chat, which is a feature on YouTube. In the chat, you can both just make a contribution towards the show, or more interestingly, you can ask a question. Questions that have a $20 contribution or more, particularly those who have a $50 contribution or more, get priority over everybody else. We also have here Catherine Hernandez, whose job is to encourage you and to motivate you to engage in support for the show. And with that, I will, not bug you about supporting the show and about asking a Super Chat question, at least for a while. I'm not committing for how long exactly, but we'll see. Okay, so let's look at this video and see what, this guy's being forced to apologize. He's backtracked. He was condemned by the Warriors. He was condemned by Virgin Galactic. He was condemned in every newspaper in Europe and the United States. And he's probably a hero in China. But let's see what he actually said, and let's see if it's worth condemnation. The fact is, he is a successful, incredibly successful tech venture capitalist who is now a billionaire. All right, here we go. Whoops, that's the wrong slide. That's the right slide. Let's press play. Whoops. We need volume. That would help. Let me just get this back to where it was supposed to be. All right, we'll go. Oops. No. Not dumb. All right, let's go there.
Coming to the Uyghurs in China, they care, but it's not top of mind for them.
Oops, that's not what I want earlier than that.
And maybe good for Americans. His China policy, the fact that he came out with a statement on the Uyghurs,
Biden.
I thought was very strong. It's one of the stronger things he did, but it's not coming up in the polls. And I think that whole Republicans interested in getting Hillary to run again is
let's be honest, nobody cares about what's happening to the Uyghurs, okay? You bring it up because you really care, and I think that's nice that you care. The rest of us don't care. I'm just telling you a very hard...
Wait, you're saying you personally don't care?
I'm telling you a very hard, ugly truth, okay? Of all the things that I care about, yes, it is below my line.
Wow. So he doesn't care about the Uyghurs. He doesn't care about the Uyghurs. Of all the things he cares about, this is below his line. And this is what freaked the world out. This little clip, this video of him saying it's below my line has been playing over and over again all over Twitter, all over the place. It's been on national television. It's been on the news shows. It's been everywhere because how dare him? How dare he say he doesn't care? Now, there's a question of how much he doesn't care, what that actually means. But there's something really honest and truthful here. How many of you care beyond a broad, abstract caring? Yes, you know, it's bad that it's happening. It's immoral that it's happening. It's bad that the Chinese are doing this. We'll get to afterwards where some of these people are actually questioning whether the Chinese are actually doing this stuff or not, or whether it's basic propaganda. But basically the point here is, if you want to interpret it the way I would interpret it, I'm not sure this is what he means, is, look, I'm busy living my life. I've got concerns about how to live the best life that I can live. This is an egoistic perspective. I don't really care in a sense that it's going to make a dent in my life, or I'm going to invest money or time or significant thought or change my opinion about Biden because of the Uyghurs. Now, you know, it's probably overstated, because certainly I've talked about the Uyghurs and I've talked about the fact that it's a travesty and it plays a role in my evaluation of China. But I'm a professional intellectual. I'm kind of paid to do this. This is what I do. For 99% of the people out there, for 99% of the people who are like Chamath Palihapitiya, something like that. Anyway, the Uyghurs have no relevance to their life. The fact that a horrible injustice is happening on the other side of the world is horrible in some sense, and on the other hand, it is not going to stop you from engaging in life. These kind of things have been happening. The human race has been engaged in these kind of behaviors forever. It again is sad at the margin, but I'm not going to lose sleep over it. I'm not going to change my day-to-day behavior for it. I'm not sending money to organizations to advocate against Uyghur genocide, although I think it would be fine if you did. To what extent should it change behavior? And it's fascinating to me that everybody was upset by this, and yet everybody behaves as if what he just said is true. Nobody literally changes their day-to-day life, their day-to-day activity. Nobody actually changes the values in their life, or very few people do, because of what's going on among the Uyghurs. People have problems in their own lives. They have relationship problems, they have monetary problems, or they just have the challenge of living a good life and pursuing a great life. So there's something very self-interested about this, and there's certainly something very honest about it. Because what he's not doing is doing the regular thing that people out there do, which is virtue signal. They'll say, oh, I care about the Uyghurs, and then they don't do anything, don't really act on it, doesn't change their life one way or the other. And the nice thing about this is he doesn't project any guilt about it. He doesn't project any guilt about it. What is going on in the chat right now? There's discussion about cookies and about Arab bakeries. There's some good Arab bakeries in Michigan, but really, we're talking about serious stuff. All right, it's distracting me. I'm getting hungry watching this. All right, so I think this is fascinating. I think it's interesting that the way the world responded to this, the people went apoplectic about this. No need to say you're sorry, Jennifer. It's fine. But let's listen to more of this, because I think the exchange between them now becomes really, really, really interesting, because I think you can see different attitudes, different way of viewing the world, different view of doing the world, from the attitude now towards this statement that has been made. Nobody cares about the Uyghurs. It doesn't make my list of things that I care about right now in my life.
Okay, of all the things that I care about, it is below my line.
Disappointing.
Well, I think people, if you explain to them what's happening to the Uyghurs in China, they care, but it's not top of mind for them.
Well, of course not. Why would it be top of mind for anybody? It's in China. It's far. These horrible things happen. You don't have any control over it. And again, life should be not about trying to solve every problem around the world and weeping and caring about every injustice that happens around the world. It's about living. It's about the positive values that life involves, that life requires.
It's not
What's
caring.
top of mind right now is they go to the grocery store and the shelves are empty.
Yeah. And prices, I mean, these guys are all pretty wealthy, but prices are significantly higher. And while their wages are higher, they're not as high as the prices have gone up. Stephanie asked, are Muslims the victims in this scenario? Yes, the Muslims are definitely the victims among the Uyghurs, in Western China.
Sure, that I care about. Yeah. I care about the fact that our economy could turn on a dime if China invades Taiwan. I care about that. I care about climate change. I care about I care about America's crippling and, decrepit healthcare infrastructure. But if you're asking me, do I care about a segment of a class of people in another country? Not until we can take care of ourselves will I prioritize them over us.
Now, notice that not until we take care of ourselves. And this is the problem, and you'll see this later on in the conversation. Basically, it's saying not, I care about my life. I care about my values. There's enough there to consume most of my thinking. There's enough there to consume most of any human being's thinking, is how to live the best life that he can in the world that exists around him. His perspective is, and you'll see more of this, we have a lot of problems here. There are a lot of real issues here. Now, those issues affect me. So I care about them more. Justifiable, absolutely. If I solve all those problems, will all the issues that affect you go away? Of course not. He's leading towards a moral equivalency between the US and China. We have problems, they have problems, we do bad things, they do bad things, which is really, really bad. But nobody focused on that. None of the criticism of him was focused about the moral equivalency he's about to make, or the whole group of them are about to make. The only guy who stands up for America, funnily and ridiculously enough, is the leftist. The altruistic leftist. All of them make moral equivalency between the United States and China. And nobody was upset about that. What they're upset about is that he said he doesn't care about the Uyghurs. In the context of his life, in the context of all the things he cares about. What can be done to help the Uyghurs practically, Wanda Freeman asks. Well, I mean, you could stop buying stuff from China, from that region in China. U.S. manufacturers, U.S. Companies could all leave that section in China. They could leave China completely. We could boycott China completely. We could shut off trade with China in order to help the Uyghurs. We could, at the very extreme of this, we could go to war with China to liberate the Uyghurs. Right? So you could go, there's a whole array of things that can be done. I know a lot of people who believe we should have entered World War II, not because necessarily Hitler was going to be a threat to the United States ultimately, which is a legitimate reason, and we could argue about whether that's a good reason, but a legitimate one. No, but because we needed to go there to stop the genocide, the Holocaust against the Jews. Well, if there's something like a Holocaust going on with the Uyghurs in China, would those same people justify a war with China in order to stop it? So there's a whole variety of things that can be done. How much of your life are you willing to give up in order to do it? All right, let's keep watching.
And I think a lot of people believe that. And I'm sorry if that's a hard truth to hear, but every time I say that I care about the Uyghurs, I'm really just lying if I don't really care.
That's good, because most people lie all the time. People lie all the time about these things. It's what we call virtue signaling, right? I know Hitler declared war on the United States, and we should have entered at that point. There was no, yeah, of course we should have. But the question was, should have we entered a year or two before that? Right? What he's calling out, which I think is very good, is the kind of virtue signaling that everybody engages in, right? Everybody engages in.
And so I'd rather not lie to you and tell you the truth. It's not a priority for me.
And my response to that is, I think it's a sad state of affairs when human rights as a concept globally, falls beneath, tactical and strategic issues that we have to have. We need to have
another luxury
belief.
It's a luxury belief, right? So the perspective that he's taking is not that the belief is wrong, not that the ultrist leftist who wants everybody to be a bleeding heart and everybody to really care and everybody to do something about it and to rise up and make a big deal out of this. And I think our political leaders should make a big deal out of this from the bully pulpit, right? But the argument is not that's wrong, that's philosophically wrong. But that's a luxury belief. That is what, and generally you could view altruism as a luxury belief. Once you're taking care of yourself and you've got a lot of money and you're living a good life, then you can start sacrificing for other people, caring about other people in this deep sense. That's the perspective. It's not to dismiss altruism, but to say, look, right now we're trying to survive, although it's kind of funny because he's a billionaire, so he's not trying to survive. The problems that America has seem like problems of wealth, problems of the rich kid in town. And so the whole framing of this from their perspective is wrong. It's altruism as a moral ideal, and these guys are kind of cynical. We don't actually care. And then you'll see some of them will actually say, we don't even think it's a problem.
That's another luxury belief.
I don't believing in the Human Declaration of Human Rights that Eleanor Roosevelt created with the United Nations. I don't think it's a luxury belief to believe that all humans should have a basic set of human rights.
I think it's a luxury belief.
Right.
By the way, the Declaration of Human Rights is terrible. It's a completely statist view of rights. It's not the view, a Lockean or Jeffersonian view of individual rights at all. At all. Yeah, I mean, there's a sense in which he's virtue signaling, maybe not about the Uyghurs, but about common Americans, about the prices going up in the grocery store, because for him it doesn't matter, right? But he can't completely not be altruistic, right? He has to give some credence to some moral code. The problem is they don't have a moral code. The most of these guys in Silicon Valley, and the left is a committed altruist, but the rest of them are pragmatists.
And the reason I think it's a luxury belief is we don't do enough domestically to actually express that view in real tangible ways. So until we actually clean up our own house, the idea that we step outside of our borders with us sort of like morally virtue signaling about somebody else's human rights track record is deplorable. Look at the number of black and brown men that are
far from deplorable.
I mean, think about this. What he's basically saying here is, and this is what I find horrific about him. What he's saying here is, we commit human rights violations, right? We commit human rights violations. We are bad. We've got big problems. We treat people horribly. Who are we to step out of our borders and give moral advice to other people? Now, that's deplorable. It's funny, because here the leftist is the one calling him on it, right? The leftist is going to be the one defending America, which is kind of funny.
Look at the number of black and brown men that are incarcerated for absolutely ridiculous crimes.
Yeah, but think about that. I agree that way too many people are incarcerated, black, brown, white, yellow, green, no matter what. There are way too many people incarcerated, primarily from victimless crimes, drug crimes, and so on. Lots and lots and lots of them. But they broke the law. And it's a law that China has against drug trading and drug use. It's a bad law, but it's not as bad as laws against free speech, laws against your religion. To morally equate what Americans do and what Chinese do is absurd and ridiculous. We don't run concentration camps. We don't run re-education camps. We put people in jail who break the law. We have standards. The standard might be wrong. The laws are terrible. So, unfortunately, in spite of the fact that I sympathize with his original statement, he goes completely downhill from here. And of course, nobody cares about this. This they all agree with. But his moral equivocation between the United States and China is absurd and ridiculous. And that's what he should be ashamed of. We are not an authoritarian regime yet. We're not an autocracy. We don't have one-man rule. And we don't have concentration camps. We don't harvest prisoners' organs and sell them on the black market as they do in China, or maybe it's not a black market.
I don't know if you saw this past week, but there was a person that was released from jail because he couldn't even be protected in jail, because in some of these cells, they run these fight clubs inside of Rikers Island that are basically tacitly endorsed by the corrections officers that don't do anything.
And the difference?
Well, this is horrible, the fact that stuff like that exists. But there's a huge difference, one of which will be articulated right now.
So hold on, Jason. So if you want to talk about the human rights of people, I think we have a responsibility to take care of our own backyard first. And then we can go and basically morally tell other people how they should be running their own countries.
I mean, there's a real truth there in a sense. And this is the example I always give, that if America becomes a shining city on the hill, if America actually lives up to its promise, if America lived up to its Declaration of Independence, if it becomes a moral standard for the world, then our bully pulpit would mean something. It would actually have power. It would have significance. So he's right in the sense, this is why all these issues are nuanced, right? He's right in the sense that as long as we're violating rights, as long as we're not a completely free country, why, should our leaders be lecturing the rest of the world? Well, yes, because there's a big difference between how bad things are here, and they're bad, and how bad they are in China, orders of magnitude worse. And again, to make the moral equivalency is horrible. To not see the difference in kind between what we do in the US with all the potential injustices that are involved and what China does to its own citizens, and not see the difference in kind there, is to be woefully blind. It's to be woefully, blind. Blind is a good word. Evasive.
The difference is, Chamath, saying what you just said in China or Saudi Arabia would put you in jail and get you 100 lashes, and you would be tortured for a decade. We here in the United States are far from perfect. We still have the death penalty, which is against the United Declaration of Human Rights, which we signed, which Eleanor Roosevelt created in the UN. And we propagated as Americans around the world. We started that, Chamath. And we can have these discussions about being better in this country. And the whataboutism that you're proposing is so disproportional to the equivalent of the Holocaust going on. We're talking about 1 million Uyghurs in concentration camps right now. To talk about what we have here that we need to fix and compare it to that, or to Saudi Arabia whipping bloggers and throwing gay people off roofs for being gay, These two things are not morally comparable.
I agree with him. I agree with the leftist. They're not morally comparable. The difference is in kind. And not recognize that, and not being willing to say, that's evil what's going on there. It's not going to change my life. But it is evil what's going on there. And we can judge it, and we can morally condemn it. And the fact that he won't do that is a horrible weakness in Chamath's perspective.
They are very far, and we need to have open discussions and talk about human rights all the time. Because if we do not talk about it all the time, then your position, which is, I don't have time for that, I want to solve my problems, then gives the green light to dictators everywhere that nobody's watching. We need to have vigilance. And that's what I find, and I think we need to work.
So I agree with that. I think we do need to be able to say that. We also need to be honest enough to say, we're going to focus on our own problems. Can't control what's going on over there. We're going to focus on our own problems. We're not going to sacrifice to solve the problems over there. We're going to focus on our own problems. We're going to condemn it morally and focus on our own problems.
Hold on a second.
Position.
That's not what I said, and that's not true.
You said you can't get up for it.
Yeah. So tell me how.
Problem.
Are you saying that the situation with the Uyghurs is the same as the Holocaust?
People who are Jewish are making that comparison. You never make a Holocaust comparison.
I'm asking you,
I think it is comparable.
Speaking,
there are upwards of 1 million people in a concentration camp right now. This is getting to numbers that are actually comparable.
It's not quite comparable. The 1 million people in a concentration camp are not being gassed to death. We're not killing millions of people in an industrial fashion as the Nazis did, and it was a lot more than 6 million Jews. It was 10 to 12 million total people just gassed and killed in a industrial manner. That's not what the Chinese are doing. So again, exaggeration is very little nuance and reason and rationality and facts and a proper moral perspective on these things from almost anybody in the culture.
It is actually a valid comparison.
You're saying there are 1 million people in a concentration camp?
That is the numbers that human rights organizations are saying. Between 300,000 and 1 million people are incarcerated right now, being tortured, raped, and doing forced sterilization, re-education, and when they're released are being tracked in ghettos.
And so are you
Jewish
saying the
people
entire
are bringing
world,
this up.
Hold on. Are you saying
as a comparison?
You're saying the entire world has basically decided that doesn't matter?
You just said you can't get up for it. I'm talking about you specifically.
But who is getting up? Well, who is getting up for it?
I am very up on it. I talk about it all the time, every week.
What about the U.S. government? What are they doing about it?
Biden just said we are going to do a ban and we are going to sanction companies that do business in that region.
So Apple and Tesla?
I think there will be increased pressure on all companies that are engaging in China over human rights.
It's goods that are sourced from those areas, right?
Correct. Yes.
It's not doing business there. It's if your supply chain comes from that area.
Correct.
Then
and it's a first
step.
Like
we won't buy Nazi goods, but we'll sell our iPhones into Nazi Germany.
Well, if you want to have a discussion about this, it's how do we disengage from China? We've had this discussion here. What amount of time will it take to disengage from countries that have brutal dictatorships that are committing human rights atrocities?
But again, look, I think I'm spending a lot of time and money actually trying to fortify America's supply chain. You guys know about some of the things that I'm doing.
Absolutely, it's fantastic.
I'm not doing that from a moral perspective. I'm doing that from a practical capitalist perspective. I think the jobs are better served for Americans. And I think that we should have the ability to build our own businesses, just like China has the right to do for themselves, without the risk of these things being undercut by policies that we don't understand, which is effectively what you do when you outsource your supply chain to countries where you're not 100% aligned with them.
Yeah, and they're dictatorships.
So I'm not even sure that China is a dictatorship the way that you want to call it that.
So he's not sure China's a dictatorship? How is it not a dictatorship? I mean, it's really bizarre. It's really bizarre. Right? How is China not a dictatorship?
Again, I think
communist country that's in the name.
Look, you have to understand, Jason, there are a set of checks and balances here on China that, at the end of the day,
what checks and balances?
I don't think that I have the moral absolutism to judge China.
See, he doesn't have the moral absolute to judge China. All of this is approached for a practical, non-moralistic, non-moral absolutist perspective. Who can judge? Who can know? I think that America's better off if the supply chain's over here, but who knows? And I'm not going to judge the Chinese, and China's not a dictatorship. What's the definition of a dictatorship? Is one man rule? No say for the population? Breaking up businesses whenever they want?
And I would say that when NATO is silent, the United Nations is silent, all of Western Europe is silent.
So the standard is when other people speak? The standard is what the United Nations does?
And America is effectively silent, that this issue may be small data points being extrapolated in a way to create a narrative that maybe not be true. And if it is true, Jason, there's a responsibility for those body politics to do something, because that is the early warning signal that the rest of the world uses to say, okay, hold on, let me reprioritize my list of things. So I guess what I'm saying is I am not going to be an armchair journalist on this topic, nor am I going to be the armchair human rights advocate for the world, because I just don't know. I can focus on the things that I know about, build the things that I know about. And if something really does get red light status, then other parties will do something. And again, I just want to be clear. NATO is silent. United Nations is silent. America is silent. A press release doesn't change the actual technical posture on these topics.
Okay.
Now, I agree with him again. It is such a mixture, but this is typical of pragmatists, right? He's just focused on what he can do, his life, his projects. And since the rest of the world doesn't care, since the United Nations doesn't care, since nobody else seems to care, he's not going to care. I mean, you got to judge for yourself, particularly in the world in which we live. The United Nations cares about a lot of things I'm not sure he should care about. Again, I find it fascinating to hear this kind of mixed signals, uncertainty, and real pragmatism. Real pragmatism.
Okay. If your position is that human rights matters to you, if large government organizations or politicians give you the green light to care about it, that's fine. I care about it intrinsically every day.
Great. I'm fine with you doing that.
I thought there was a segue there to talk about the Ray Dalio thing that Freeberg cares about. This debate that you're having between kind of realism and idealism in foreign policy is sort of what Dalio tackles, right, Freeberg?
Look, I mean, it sounds to me like there's, let's just say, a red herring. There always needs to be, as Chamath points out, a narrative on framing our enemy when, you're running out of land. I mean, you guys saw this, was it a journal article or a New York Times article that came out today that U.S. intelligence revealed that Putin had actually put some actors into the eastern Ukraine to set up for a reason to have a response and therefore an excuse to invade the Ukraine. So he was trying to create a bit of a fireworks show to give him an excuse. We always need a narrative that we can sell to our.
So I'm gonna cut him off. Basically, what he's gonna argue is that we can't even know that anything is happening to the Uyghurs because it could be just a story that some Americans are telling us in order to justify us not liking the Chinese. So the Chinese are really great, they're fantastic, but they're competitors of ours, and therefore we need to create a story, a mythology around how evil they are to justify being tough on the Chinese, just like the Russians need to create an excuse to invade Ukraine. So they create this, they'll create some kind of attack on themselves. They'll initiate it in order to give them that excuse. Again, this is the kind of stuff that happens when people stop trusting the media, the news sources, the politicians, everybody else, and they don't have firsthand experience. They don't have first knowledge of these places, firsthand knowledge. So they start making stuff up or accuse others of making stuff up. So there's no real crisis in China. None of this stuff is really bad. I find it interesting that people believe. So again, you can spin this in both ways. A lot of people believe bad things about China because they want to believe bad things about China. I find it fascinating that, for example, on stuff that the mainstream media says about, I don't know, Trump or about COVID, well, it's the mainstream media. We can't believe anything they tell us. They're all politically motivated. But when the mainstream media tells us stuff about China that fits the narrative, that is, China's really, really bad, oh, then they're absolutely right. So it's fascinating that people adopt what the mainstream media provides them when it fits into their tribal construct, and they reject it when they don't. And a lot of this is a consequence of the difficulty in figuring out what's objectively true and what's objectively not. And given the amount of conspiracy theories, given the bias that actually exists in the media, given everything else that is going on, you know, it's hard. It actually takes work to figure out what's true and what's not true, what's accurately portrayed by the media and what's not accurately portrayed in the media. Now, you know, I've said many times what I would do in China. I think in looking at a country like China and its behavior towards its own people, whether it's the Uyghurs or whether it's their tech executives, or whether it's, although we're about to do very similar things to the tech executives, or whether it's you know, free speech, everything, the whole attitude of the Chinese government to its own people, we should be very wary of China. And we should be willing to condemn that kind of behavior morally. And when China steals intellectual property rights, and when China uses hackers to hack into American companies or hack into our national security computers, I think the United States should treat China harshly in a sense of withdraw ambassador, shut down diplomatic relations with China, and then tell our companies they're on their own. If they want to do business in China, they're on their own, right? China is, as a system of government, is a bad place and becoming worse. Becoming worse. And I think we should call them on it. I have always been an advocate for the President of the United States and for leaders of the United States to use the bully pulpit to make clear, moral, unequivocal statements. Just the fact that China took over Hong Kong should have been a major event that should have concerned us. And we need to do the same with Saudi Arabia. And we do need to do the same with lots of other countries. And I think if we did, and if we did it consistently, I think these countries would change. So we should criticize their loud behavior, not you as an individual out there. Not Chamath, he's just living his life. But our leaders, that's what they're there for, should use the bully pulpit to criticize, to condemn, and should make clear what our moral estimation of the regime is by not being friendly to them. Somebody says the U.S. cannot afford to be unfriendly to Saudi Arabia. Why? What does Saudis give us that we can't afford to be unfriendly with them? Nothing. Zero. We get nothing from the Saudi Arabians that we don't already have. We have nothing to fear from the Saudis. We could crush them in a minute. What are the Saudis exactly? What is it that we can't afford to upset them about? I mean, China, we're far, far more dependent in an economic sense on China than we are on Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is a close ally. That's a joke. Right? So no, I mean, we need a foreign policy guided by idealism, guided by ideas, but then we have to have a clear vision of what those ideals are. And yes, I think we should be implementing those ideas internally and externally. We should be doing it both inside and outside. So the Saudis start accepting gold for the oil or start accepting euros for the oil. Who cares? Why does that matter? What economic value does the fact that the Saudis only accept dollars for the oil provide us? It's not clear any. It's a mirage. It's a pretense to think that we depend on Saudi Arabia in anything. And by the way, the Saudis only accept dollars because it's in the Saudis' interest only to accept dollars. They don't trust any other currency. But, you know, the Saudis are reforming in the right direction, but too slow. And as long as they're killing people and stoning people and harassing people, we should condemn them morally. It's, I think, very informative to know that when people don't have a clear moral code, when people don't know what idealism could actually be, that there is an idealism of self-interest, which is what I'm talking about. But an idealism of self-interest views human life as valuable, therefore views the violation of human rights as bad. And then therefore views it as selfish to condemn bad behavior, and an act of justice to call out the bad guys. But selfish justice. Quint, thank you for the support, appreciate it. Quint. But most people, particularly the kind of people, successful people, businessmen, business people out there, they don't have a moral context for what they believe. They are pragmatists. So on the one hand, he's absolutely right. What do I care? Busy living my life. On the other hand, he's wrong. He does care to some extent. The question is, how much is he willing to do about it? Not much, because we live in a world in which there are other bigger problems that need to handle, because he's living in the context of his own life. It's fascinating to me that somebody like that would say, I'll care about it when the United Nations cares about it, when Biden cares about it. That's a real weakness. Real weakness. All right, let's see. We've got a few Super Chat questions, very few actually, only 4 Super Chat questions. We are, what are we, $540 short of a goal of $600, which we have every show. Catherine here is desperately trying to get you motivated to ask more questions. Super Chat is open. You can ask me questions about anything. Travis, thank you. We made it to 28,000 thanks to the Lex Friedman show and the interview on Lex Friedman. That got us about 100 additional contributors that got us to 28,000. So subscribers, not contributors. I appreciate that. But I know a lot of you, and you don't forget to like the show before you leave, if you like it, of course. And don't forget to show your support, value for value. If you get value from the show, use the Super Chat here to ask questions, and we will get to that. All right. Let's see. All right. So I will thank you, Ed. Really appreciate that. Thank you for all you do. And we're starting to get some questions. So just get them, feed them in as they come. I will answer them. Priority is given to questions that are asked that are associated with over $20 or more. $20 or more. Okay, Ali. They also swap husbands with Han Chinese one, cut people clothes to specific lengths, and destroy any Islamic style building, enforcing Chinese style only. Yes. So they are actively trying to impose Chinese Han culture onto the Muslims of Western China, which again, I think there are a lot of right-wing people in the United States and Europe who would love to have that attitude of trying to force our culture onto Muslims in our midst. I find it interesting that those same people condemn China for doing it when they would love to do it here as well. China is wrong to do this. A free country, you have freedom of religion, freedom of wearing what you want, freedom of marrying who you want. But China is not free. And this is just one aspect of the many ways in which China is not free. And China should be condemned for the lack of freedom that it has. Now, what do you do about it beyond condemning it is a different story. I still trade with Chinese companies and Chinese individuals because I still believe in Chinese companies and Chinese individuals. I still think that most of the money that they get, a significant majority of the money they get, it goes to them as individuals, and they are producing values and are creating values. I also think the geopolitical world around us is nuts. It is completely divorced from any kind of moral idealism, and therefore it's suicide for me to act as if I have moral ideals vis-a-vis foreign interactions while the rest of the world just ignores those. And I'm not much into suicide. And therefore, it doesn't stop me from buying stuff from China. I can imagine a scenario where it did. If China became a real military threat to the United States, I would stop buying stuff from China. And if there was actually a program to, not to boycott China, but to actually, from a foreign policy perspective, if there was a way, if our foreign policy establishment actually had a policy of going after China and condemning China, then I think me and you not buying Chinese goods would have an impact. I think short of that, it just means nothing. One of Freeman says, buy from Taiwan. Taiwan makes very few things. A lot of the technology you buy, a lot of the stuff you buy, technology, comes with stuff made in China. Stuff made in Taiwan. But yeah, there's no way you could stop buying things from China. And you say buy Vietnam, but Vietnam's not a good country. We don't know as much about Vietnam. We don't hear as many stories about Vietnam. But Vietnam still is a dictatorship. There's no free speech in Vietnam. They don't treat their own people that well. Vietnam and China hate each other, but Vietnam is, from political perspective, maybe not as bad as China, but close. And the people in Vietnam are, fact is, less productive. There's less economic freedom in Taiwan, at least there was, in Vietnam than there is in China. So it's tricky who to trade with in the world out there and who not to trade with. It's something that should be left to individuals to make decisions. This is why I don't think politicians should get involved in who you buy stuff and who you don't buy stuff from. What politicians can do is, again, they can condemn and they can withdraw diplomatic sanction from evil regimes. But I don't think we should have an embassy in Vietnam. I don't think we should have an embassy in Vietnam. I don't think we should have diplomatic relations with Vietnam. I don't think we should have diplomatic relationship with any dictatorship in the world. I think we should withdraw our diplomatic sanction as a country from every dictatorship in the world. We should basically say, we're not going to stop you. We're not going to invade you. We're going to condemn you. And we're not going to have embassies. And we're not going to have diplomatic relationship. We're not going to pretend that you are civilized. We're not going to give you the pretense. We're not going to be part in the UN. We're not going to sit at the same table with you. Our citizens, if they want to trade with you, it's their choice. But as a government, as a political entity, we will have nothing to do with you. That would send such a powerful signal to the world. But of course, you're never going to get it without a dramatic philosophical change among our leadership. It's just not something that our current people can do. You saw it in the exchange before. There's just no, I mean, on the one hand, you have a complete altruist leftist. He's not quite willing to do it. And if he did it, he would do it in the name of sacrifice. On the other hand, you have the pragmatists trying to find loopholes, trying to shrug off responsibilities, refusing to make a judgment and condemning his own country. Very difficult to find somebody and to find enough support for policy that actually stands on a moral foundation. Wanda Freeman has given me a lot of amens this show. That's unusual. All right, Adam asks, a parallel with FDR and Americans of Japanese ancestry. In terms of what FDR did to Americans of Japanese ancestry. China interned 10 to 15% of the most Islamist Uyghurs. After dozens of massacres, FDR interned all Americans of Japanese ancestry with no enemy action from any of them. I think there is a parallel, although I suspect, and I think it's true, that the American Japanese were treated much better than the Uyghurs are treated in China. There's no re-education camps. There's no tortures. There's no forced marriages. There's no destruction of their architecture. There's no attempt to have them change the clothing that they wear. It's a difference between what a country that is basically free, even when it's done something that is probably mistaken, and a country that's authoritarian and a dictatorship and has no respect for individuals and no respect for individual rights, what it does. That's the difference between what Americans did to interning the Japanese and what I think the Chinese are doing to the Uyghurs. This is collective punishment. It's wrong. It was probably wrong to do with regard to Japanese during World War II. And even then, this is another difference. It was done for the duration of the war with the idea that we just don't know which one of you have allegiance to Japan. Again, I'm not trying to justify it, but it's a fixed duration. And when that duration is over, you're free. There's no fixed duration here. There is until you're re-educated, until you're forced into a particular so-called frame of mind, a particular culture. Now, I'm all for greater surveillance of the Uyghurs, infiltrating their networks, figuring out who the bad guys are, and going after them, putting on them trial and sending them to jail for sedition, for terrorism, for whatever it happens to be. But I'm against the collective punishment, and I'm against the kind of attempt to brainwash and indoctrinate that is going on over there. And yes, I think America made a mistake with the Japanese, interning the Japanese, the same kind of collective punishment. All right, John asks, this is the last $20 question, so if you guys want to your questions answered, we're still way off. I don't know, this is going to be the weakest Super Chat day ever, unless you guys wake up and open that checkbook and start asking questions. We've had some really good Super Chat days recently. I mean, really off the charts good Super Chat days. So I'm not shocked that we might not have one today. Don't forget also to like the show before you leave. With 156 people watching live, but only 89 likes. Maybe you don't like the show. That's fine. Don't give it a like. But if you do, even a little bit, please check that like button. It helps the algorithm, really helps the algorithm with YouTube. Let's see. John asks, just a reminder that you can contribute any amount in Super Chat. That's right. You can do any amount. You can do, he just did $26.75. You can do $20. You can do $100. You can do $500. You do not have to use the preset. Instead of a preset of $20, why not bump it up a bit? There you go. Thank you, John. I really appreciate that, and appreciate the support. Hugh asks, it's 20 Australian, but we'll count it as if it's 20. Peter Zihan, a geopolitical analyst, argues that the CCP will fail within 10 years due to the reduced military presence abroad, regarding shipping, fragile economy, demographic collapse, etc. In your view, is this prediction credible? I think it is. It's credible. I don't know how realistic it is. I'm not going to give it a high probability. It's probably 20, 30% probability. The CCP, as I've been saying now for months, years probably, is in big trouble. It's got problems for demographic reasons. China's population is shrinking because of the one-child policy. So for years, they only had one child. And now, when they've opened that up and allowed parents to have more than one child, they don't want to have more than one child. It's like culturally ingrained to have one child. So, they're way below replacement. There's no mass immigration into China, even non-mass. There's really no significant immigration into China. There's a real risk of a brain drain. The only thing preventing a brain drain in China is the infantile, stupid, nationalistic, short-sighted, perverse immigration policy of the United States of America, who should be eager to accept any Chinese who want to come here. Not just Chinese, but any Chinese who want to come here. And I think you'd see a significant brain drain coming into the country because they'd like to live here. So shrinking population. They've also got a problem. Part of the reason there's a shrinking population is they've got more males than females. Because of during the one-child policy, they would abort the females to have males because of in Chinese culture, male children are more important than female children. So they would work hard to get out. They only have one shot, so they would literally abort the female to have the male, with the hope of having a male in the future. And so what they've got is more men than women, which means that some of those men are going to leave China to find a wife, and some of them are just never going to marry, and as a consequence, fewer kids. So they've got demographic problems. That's one. Second, they've got real economic problems. They are far too centrally planned. There's far too much wasted capital. There is way too much state regulation, state control, and that is increasing under Xi, who is trying to reduce inequality. He doesn't want egalitarianism, but he wants to reduce inequality. So he's going after big Chinese tech companies. He's going after very successful billionaires. He's doing what the American government would love to do. He is actually executing on it and actually doing it. So they've got, I think, real economic problems that derive from the fact that the central government is becoming more powerful, more central planning. There's oppression of successful entrepreneurs and billionaires, and that's going to manifest itself in economic problems. There's less economic freedom, and less promotion of entrepreneurship, which used to be the hallmark of what drove Chinese success and Chinese innovation and Chinese economic progress. And a trade war, if you will, tariffs with the United States, are bad for the United States, but they're also bad for China. And China doesn't want, but is getting more and more backlash from the world because of its behavior around COVID, around the origins of COVID, but also around its human rights issues. And as a consequence of that, that is going to long-term hurt the Chinese economy. And then the question is, what do the Chinese do about it? That is, what do the Chinese do? The Chinese rebel? Do the Chinese stand up to the Chinese government? Right? There's always a fear of a civil war. There's always a fear of another Tiananmen Square as the Chinese authorities get more authoritarian. They're actively and more aggressively limiting free speech in China. They're limiting certain behaviors in China. They passed this regulation that you cannot have effeminate men on TV. I mean, it's kind of regulations like that that just are hinting at what's under the surface of the kind of cultural control that the Chinese want to have over their own people. And by doing that, they are going to hurt the productive members of their society. They're going to hurt the prospects of the economy to grow and be successful and prosper. And yes, I do think, to go back to the question, I do think that the demographic issues, the fragile economy, huge amounts of debt, huge amounts of investments in real estate, some of which are starting to collapse, and we're seeing that. All of that they're going to pay a price. I do not consider China a threat to the United States because I think China is much, much, much weaker than people realize, much, much weaker than people fear. From a military perspective, from a political perspective, and ultimately from an economic perspective. All right, we got Todd coming in with $100. Thank you, Todd. You've been great. So thanks for the support. Very, very appreciated. Jeff with $100 Canadian. He says, my Jeep is in the shop. Gonna cost me a couple of grand tomorrow. This is all I can spare. I appreciate that. Value is shown for your efforts to spread knowledge. Thank you, Jeff. I really appreciate that. And good luck. Good luck with the Jeep. Yes, it costs money to repair your Jeep. Isn't it funny, though, that in Canada, if your Jeep breaks down, and you have to pay $2,000 to get your transportation back, but if your body breaks down, even a little bit, it's free. It's free. And people think that's a good thing. But ultimately, what that does is that, the technology around repairing Jeeps, the options, the variety is going to be greater in Canada around places where you can make some money, where people make money, than around healthcare where it's free. Free is usually shitty quality. But healthcare is free in Canada. Repairing your Jeep is not. And nobody expects you to buy insurance to cover every breakdown when your Jeep breaks down. But they do expect you to cover insurance that covers every sniffle that you might have when you get sick. Jennifer, thank you for all you do. I appreciate it. Thank you, Jennifer. Theme Master, thank you for the support. I appreciate it. All right, let's see. Some $20 questions. We did Hugh's question. We did Jeff's question. We still have Steven's question. What is the painting behind you on the right? So that's my left. That painting is Vermeer. It's one of my favorite paintings. I think that painting... He has two paintings that are very similar. This one is the geographer. You see he's got a globe there. So it's a scientist, a geographer, Northern Europe, 17th century, the beginning of the scientific revolution. He's got another one called the astronomer, where it's a very similar, very similar setting, but the window's open and he's leaning out and he's looking out. He's got a telescope. I think this one is in Switzerland, maybe at a museum in Switzerland. I can't remember. But that is Vermeer. Vermeer is one of my favorite painters of all time. Not always because of the topic, but because of the way they're painted. Here I love the topic as well. This is what makes this one of my favorite Vermeers, is that the topic is great. This is a scientist, a moment of inquiry, and it's beautifully done. And unfortunately, the camera's not in focus there. I could put it in focus. Let me see if I can give you a little bit of a sense of what that looks like when it's in focus. No, I'm turning the wrong thing. There we go. We turn that. There you go. Now you can see the sculpture and the painting in focus, and it truly is a beautiful painting. And Vermeer, I love everything by Vermeer. And of course, this is a sculpture of David. It's a 19th century sculpture. This is a 19th century cast of an original. This is, in a sense, it's an original. Bronzes are originals. This is David. What you're missing is the sword. The sword is broken, but he's putting the sword back, and right there is Goliath's head. So he's just chopped off Goliath's head. And he's just got this posture of confidence, relaxation after the bloody event. He's won. I love the story of David. I love almost every sculpture of David ever made. And this is one I could afford and buy. I can't afford Michelangelo's David, and 15 foot high wouldn't fit in my home. But I really love this. Do you have any Greek statues? I don't. I actually prefer 19th century sculpture to Greek sculpture. I prefer Michelangelo to Greek sculpture. I find Greek sculpture too cold, too, whoops, going the wrong direction. There we go. Too static, too frozen. Again, I'm generalizing. There's some amazing Greek sculptures. But I find 19th century sculpture, Michelangelo and Bernini in the 17th century or 16th century, I find their sculpture more interesting, more alive, more individualized than even the Greeks. Although I love Greek sculpture and I love going to museums in Greece and in places that have Greek sculpture. All right. Let's see. We've got, so that was Stephen, yes. Aim Batical. How do you defend the United States economy relying on China for computer chips, which has created a chip shortage in the United States, doing a school debate on globalization on if it's good or bad? Well, what does it mean that we depend on China? We depend on manufacturing in China. Manufacturing is the easy part of the chip process. The actual design of chips, the chip innovation, progress in chip making all happens in the United States. And it's manufactured. The easy stuff, if you will, the relatively easy stuff, is done in China. It means that it couldn't be done in the United States. We don't have enough engineers in the United States to get it done. We don't have enough capacity to produce it here. It would have to be done outside of the United States. Now, a lot of chips are made in Taiwan. Some chip companies have moved chip manufacturing to Thailand over the years. Thailand has high-quality engineers and has the capacity to produce these kind of things. But the fact is that if you want to hire tomorrow 10,000 engineers and do some big technology project, the only place in the world, or the only two places in the world you can do that is China and India. And India doesn't have the infrastructure to be able to both produce that and then ship it effectively to where you need it to get to. It's changing. India will and can become the chip-making place in the world. But the fact is China has the engineers, has the capacity to do it, and has the shipping capability, the ports, the trains, the trucks, the highways, to move these things around and to get them to where they need to be. So, if not for COVID, and if not for all the lockdowns, and if not for the regulations that restrict our ports, there would be no chip shortage. The chip shortage is self-made, and it's self-made primarily by bad COVID lockdowns and bad COVID essential workers versus non-essential workers. China still supplies us and would supply us with chips. Now, the real leaders in chips, particularly the more advanced chips, the more sophisticated chips, the chips where we're worried about losing intellectual property, those chips are made in Taiwan and South Korea. And again, the supply chain problems there are not because there's any problems in South Korea and in Taiwan. The real problems there are because the United States has ridiculous regulations about its ports, was not prepared for what happened. So these are all self-made creations. I don't blame the Chinese for our chip shortage. And again, it's not mostly China. It's Taiwan, South Korea, Thailand, and a lot, and some, particularly for the simpler chips in China, the more commoditized chips in China. Why not? Supply chains are amazing, and they work phenomenally. They work phenomenally. Supply chains work phenomenally during times where governments don't intervene. The more governments intervene, and look, this goes back to Donald Trump's attempts to raise tariffs and engage in a trade war with China, which disrupted world supply chains. It relates to COVID. It relates to the fact that Biden hasn't done anything to promote trade and encourage more trade by lowering tariffs, by encouraging more movement of goods. You pay the price. When you dabble in central planning, when you dabble in restrictions on trade, you're going to pay a price. And part of the price we're paying right now is chip shortages. It's not because China is holding us hostage in some way. And it's not like we wouldn't have the chip shortage if the factories had been in the US. Lockdowns would have prevented the workers from going to the factories. Or the truckers being able to go to the factories to pick up the chips. And we don't have enough engineers to do it in the United States. We couldn't build the plants here anyway. Maybe build them in Mexico or Costa Rica or something. Taylor says there is an advanced chip plant in Costa Rica. I'm not surprised. The chip plants all over the world, and the supply chain problem right now is global. It's not unique to China. RDF says Trump was an economic idiot. I think you're being too generous to Trump. Too generous to Trump. All right. Todd, thank you. Wow. Todd is really taking us over $500. So we really need 5 $20 questions, and we're over $600. 5 $20 questions. I'm going to go over these less than $20 questions, and I'm going to let you think of a question and find the $20. There's the first one. Stephen asks, why can't I ask questions about people having sex on film? What is your take on it? Why can't you ask questions about people having sex on film? I don't understand. I don't understand that. What is my take on people having sex on film? Well, I'm not sure what you mean. Do you mean actual pornography, where people literally have sex on film and it's shown to us in graphic detail? Or do you mean people simulating sex on film, where they go through the motions of having sex? So they might be naked, but there's no literal penetration, there's no actual sex. They're just doing as if. It really depends. Look, I find it hard to imagine what kind of psychology one would have to want to be in a porn movie. That is, to be an actor or an actress in a porn movie. Is it possible to have any kind of healthy psychological framework? I once heard Leonard Peikoff say that, there's certain people who psychologically are, what's the term? People who like to be watched, people who like to show themselves. So it's possible that you would have people who want to perform on film. I don't think watching porn is immoral or wrong or destructive. I actually think it can be quite educational if taken with the right perspective. You can learn something from porn. They do stuff there that in regular life you might not encounter and you might not consider. And once you see it, you go, maybe that would be fun. And it turns out that sometimes it is fun. And maybe you should have thought of it. And, so I actually think you can, particularly in a repressed society, in a society where we don't talk about porn, when we don't talk about sex, when we don't talk about sexual positions, when we don't talk about what gives one pleasure and what doesn't give one pleasure and how to work through that, I think porn can be educational, and where parents don't talk about with their kids, and where kids don't, I think there's value there. Now, some of it is over the top. Some of it is pretty disgusting. Some of it is horrible. Some of it is, downright evil. But yeah, I don't think that watching porn makes you a bad human being, particularly if you don't overconsume it, if you're not in a sense using it as an excuse not to engage in sex itself. When you're using it as an excuse not to pursue sex, then it's horrible. Right? So as long as you're not using it to, I think Lena Peikoff says, evade or escape reality. I think being in porn is questionable. Somebody said it's the word I was looking for, exhibitionist. There might always be exhibitionists who want to do that, who out of their own free will participate in pornography. Fine. Right? I don't think it's the big problem of the world. This is one area where I disagree with Yoram Chazoni on. I don't think it is destroying the world. But wait a minute, Yaron. What about the motivation on the guy's part to have sex with hot girls? I don't understand the question. So I don't know what exactly you're asking, Stephen. I don't know why you say you can't ask questions about people having sex on film. Was that a YouTube thing? Was that a me thing? Who is not letting you ask the question? Now, if it's in a mainstream movie, absolutely. I think the many contexts in which sex is beautifully done on film. I think it's often an integral part of the story. Why not? Ayn Rand was a pioneer in depicting sex in novels and depicting sex scenes in a novel. Remember, Atlas Shrugged was published in 1957. Fountainhead was published in 1945. This was not typical of novels back then. And I think sex should be depicted in films where it makes sense, not in a gratuitous way, not just to get as clickbait, but where it actually, makes sense to depict sex in it, where there's a romance and the sex is meaningful from an aesthetic perspective. I have no problem with erotic art, with paintings depicting sexual acts, or with sculpture depicting sexual acts. I actually think they can be quite beautiful. It is an important, beautiful, amazing part of human life. And it should be part of the array of human experiences that artists portray. And I think it's super prudish and super repressed for it not to be, for serious artists not to be willing to explore sexuality as a topic for the art. And I think that's true in cinema as much as it's true in any form of art. All right, you probably got more than you wanted on that question. Let's see. Philosophical Zombie Hunter says he has to go, so let me get this question now. Hopefully he hasn't left yet. What's your opinion on Hernandez Desoto's work in Peru to get poor people property rights and titles, and how they fought off the shining path? Look, I'm a huge fan of that work. I think it's terrific work. I think I've often advocated for it. I think it's a way in which poor countries can solve a chunk of their poverty problems. I think it's an important way in which you can do land reform that is not a violation of people's rights, but actually recognizes the rights of the people who've used the land, who've lived on the land. So I would privatize the favelas. I would give, in Brazil, in Peru, all over the world, in Soweto, in South Africa, I would give the people who live in these slums, I would give them property rights over the land. I would certainly do that for farmers, poor farmers all over the third world. I would give them property rights over the farms that they have lived in. That provides them with capital. It provides them with the ability to then mortgage that farm and invest in a tractor, or leave or sell the farm and go and do something in the city. It just gives them options, and it opens up a world. It provides them with capital and makes them participants in a capitalist economy. So I'm a huge fan of that part of Hernandez Desoto's work. I wish he was more of a laissez-faire capitalist, but he's so close, and he's really, really good. Todd says Dagny and Hank. Yeah, Dagny and Hank, have amazing sex, right? In a pretty hot scene in Atlas Shrugged, and I'm a huge supporter of Dagny and Hank having sex, for what it's worth, and for it being depicted, and for the fact that Ayn Rand treated sex as this amazing human activity, not as something to be hidden, not as something to be shy about, but something to be analyzed and something to be thought of, something to think about: who you sleep with, why you sleep with them, and things like that. And what does it mean? What is the meaning of sex? All right, we are now, I don't know, $30 short, $20 short. Yeah, $20 short of our $600 goal. So one $20 questions and we're done. All right, Andrew asks. Oh no, we've got one more $20 question. What is the best case for globalization? I love globalization. Like, globalization means global trade, global movement of people, global movement of capital. The best case for globalization is first of all, the fact that globalization just means freedom. It's just freedom. Freedom to trade with whoever you want, freedom to travel wherever you want, freedom to move your capital wherever you want to move your capital. Globalization is amazing. It is stunningly good. It is stunningly valuable. It has raised the quality and standard of living of people all over the world. It has benefited America through unbelievable ways. Globalization does not mean one world government. Globalization does not mean rule by the elites. It means global trade. That's what it's always meant. Globalism is an anti-concept that people have come up with to try to portray the one world government idea. But the one world government idea is best portrayed by the idea of one world government. Globalization has always meant just zero tariffs, let the goods flow, let the capital flow, let people move around. And not only with free countries, with all countries. The only rational trade policy is zero tariffs, unilaterally. I don't care about what you want to do to your own people. I've done so many shows on this. I don't care if you want to penalize your own people by putting tariffs on them. The only rational trade policy is a trade policy of zero tariffs. And then quality, price, standard of living goes up across the board. Everybody, standard of living goes up. Rich countries and poor countries, all of them. And this is not, there's no question here. There's no, I wonder. No, this is fact. This is about as true economically as anything could be. Now, as an individual, you get to choose who you trade with and who you don't. Countries don't trade, only individuals do. Remove all tariffs from everybody would be ideal. But in the meantime, just reducing tariffs to zero in the United States would be a great step in the right direction. It will work out amazingly for all countries, rich and poor. Anthony Brinkley asks, is holding Olympics in China an act of appeasement or not that big of a deal? Well, of course it's an act of appeasement. But of course, holding the World Soccer tournament in Qatar is an act of appeasement. And, there's appeasement upon appeasement. Now, I like the fact that the United States is now viewing this as a diplomatic thing. They're not sending diplomats to the Olympics. They're just sending athletes. And I think that's appropriate. You should never send diplomats to the Olympics. The Olympics are not a nationalistic, a diplomatic, my country versus your country. The Olympics are an opportunity to celebrate achievement, team achievement, individual achievement. That's what it is. So yes, it's appeasement, but yeah, in the big picture, small fry as compared to everything else. All right, we're back to Andrew's question. Does it lower your level of caring about humanitarian crises knowing that there's no will to implement the political changes that would solve them? Yes. Yeah, I mean, there's nothing I can do about it. I could do something about them if we lived in a rational world, because I think the bully pulpit, and I think that having people in positions of power care matters. Yeah, it lowers the caring, because there's nothing you can do anyway. Michael asked, I think conservatives like Yoram Chazoni are slowly starting to realize Ayn Rand needs to be taken seriously. People are asking them about her. Maybe. I hope you're right, Michael. I'm not sure you are, but I hope you're right. Why do you never criticize Jewish tribalism, says Cobb. I often criticize Jewish tribalism. When I talk about Israel, I criticize Jewish tribalism. When I talk about why I left Israel, I talk about the fact that I left Israel because Israel is too tribal a society. Jewish tribalism is terrible. The last show I did, I said that this concern about, that maybe the Jews would be better off if they'd all just assimilated and there were no Jews. You're just looking to criticize me, but the fact is that I have often criticized Jewish tribalism. Okay, Matthias Desmet is getting a lot of attention since Robert Malone mentioned him on Rogan. Do you have any thoughts on the theory of mass formation? Yeah, I mean, I don't know much about this, but I'm suspicious. Partially because I'm suspicious of anything, of generally Robert Malone and people he invokes. I'm suspicious of using mass formation to attribute human behavior, where a lot of people do the same thing, rather than looking at, all right, what's actually going on? Why are people behaving in a particular way? I think it's a cop-out. I think the whole mass formation thing is a cop-out. And it's a cop-out by people who are wrong. Robert Malone is wrong about vaccines. So he's using this mass formation in order to excuse his wrongness, or in order to pretend that he's the right one and everybody else is wrong. Stephen asked, have you seen a documentary called Tim's Vermeer? I have not. I've heard a lot about it. I've heard a lot of details about it. I have to admit, I'm not that interested because it demystifies a certain aspect of Vermeer. I like to think of Vermeer. Well, I wonder, right? I just enjoy Vermeer for what he did. How he did it exactly. I'll probably watch it at some point because I'm curious. Richard Cunningham, have you read Viktor Frankl's Man's Searching for Meaning? If so, what did you think of it? I read it like 30, 40 years ago. I can't remember. From what I remember of it, there are aspects of it I really liked. There's aspects of it that I think are really true. There's aspects of it that really relate and are connected to reality. And the need for meaning, the need for purpose in an objectivist framework is real. And I think Man's Search for Meaning is part of that. I think Frankl ultimately finds meaning in the wrong places, in a sense. But I think there's a lot of truth in it. Again, I don't want to comment too much about it because it's been too long since I read it, and I don't know it well enough. Okay, Scott asked, did you hear that Collins knew it was likely a lab leak in early 2020 and said debate would do harm to science in China and could damage international harmony? No, I don't think he actually said that. I think that's taken out of context. But look, the people at the NIH and at this company that they funded know a lot more about the potential of this being a lab leak than they are claiming. I mean, that becomes very clear from reading Ridley's book. And they're very concerned, they're political animals, and they're very concerned about cooperation with China in the future and geopolitical issues, and they're less concerned about us, the common man, the idiot stuck in the cave, actually knowing the truth. But I don't think Collins actually said what you're saying. He said, but I do think he knows more than he's letting on. The best case for globalization, let me just reiterate, is individual rights. It's freedom. It's my right to trade with whoever I want, and without the government interfering, without the government taxing, without the government stepping in. That's the best case for globalization. What do you think is your biggest accomplishment is? What do you think my biggest accomplishment is? Staying alive? I don't know. Getting to the point where I can communicate objectivism, or at least parts of objectivism, as well as I can, and to large audiences. I think that's my biggest accomplishment, something like that. Ed says, if Rand was alive today and you could ask only one question, what would you ask? Oh, God. I don't know. I'm not good at these kind of things. I don't know. I'd have to really think about it. If there's only one, what am I really confused about in objectivism and I really need clarity? I don't know. Ed asks, have you seen 1883 on Paramount streaming? It is the best TV I have ever seen. Wow. To me, Hugoist. Wow. All right. I'm in. I've seen it advertised. I will check it out. I will check you out. I thought Mr. Sunshine was Hugoist. I'm not sure if you've seen Mr. Sunshine, but you're saying it's better than that. Wow. Why are there so many free riders? Good question. Good question. I don't know. Some people don't have money. Some people are not sure they like me. Some people don't like me and therefore don't want to support the show. Some people just don't see why they should pay for something they're getting for free. Some people support the show on a monthly basis. But again, you're right. A lot fewer people actually support the show financially than listen to the show. So they are, I don't know, something like, I'd say at least 50% of the people who listen to the show are free riding off of it. Probably 75% if you take into account that not the same people listen to all shows. Maybe 80. But I think that's pretty typical. It would be nice if you guys supported the show, if everybody who listened to the show supported it. That would be fantastic. I could really just live off of the show. And you can do that on YaronBrookShow.com/support. You can do it on Patreon. You can do it on Subscribestar. And Richard resents my freeloading comment, but it is what it is. Richard, you can do $2 once in a while. I think you can afford $2 once in a while. I appreciate all of you who do support it. There's a lot of you, 600-700 people who support the show. You guys keep it going. You guys allow me to promote these ideas to an ever-growing audience. You guys made it possible for me to do that Lex Friedman interview that now has 159,000 views. I think that's right. And 1,343 comments, and has led to well over 100 subscribers to this show. So Stephen supports the show even though we have differences. I appreciate that because you obviously get some value for it and you support it for the values you get. If you didn't get any values from it, don't support it. I want this to be a trade, not a sacrifice. All right, everybody. I will see you from my hotel in Miami or in West Palm Beach or whatever happens to be. I will see you in my hotel from there in the next few days. I assume, as long as there's good internet connection. Glenn, thank you. Really appreciate that. As long as there's good internet connection, I will do shows from there. That's always the if the internet is good enough. But if I don't see you, have a great week. Have a great weekend. And Todd, thank you. I really appreciate that. So, I will see you. I'm going to be gone for a week, but I'm pretty sure I'll do a show from the road. Bye, everybody. Have a great